you're on. Jay Barber.
Jay Barber. I was in reading that episode from Barber. Also reminded me of the various cables. Quite a few messages in letters from Francis, and there are also cables, and this is some of them. Cable about Brisbane, and that was a Warana festival procession, which we participated in, and it said, splendid response received. Barber says, good old Billy boy, and that many more opportunities will soon arise.
Yes. Oh, I just was questioning after the messages you previously got, you know, that Barber saying something will open up for you.
Yeah.
Do you have any?
No.
In retrospect, can you say?
No. All I know is that certainly opportunities did arise.
Yeah.
There was no question that it was a wonderful, active, Barber-filled period of 2 years, which actually then continued. But I'm just saying 2 years. It's 2 years before, over that period before Barber dropped the body. Another one was your letter to Francis, 29th January, about my work in Brisbane made me happy. Be prepared for more opportunities in near future. Love to you, Michael, Joni, Ruthie, Jenny, May, Diana, Barber. And that was, as I've written here, the above two cables were in response to our groups sponsoring a float in the Warana Festival procession. The float carried large photographs of Barber, and we handed out many leaflets afterwards. Another cable was love from God-man to Billy Man on his birthday, and to Joni, Ruthie, Michael, Jenny. That was to the family. And another one which says, beloved Barber is very happy with you and May and all co-workers for putting him on beautiful float and taking him through Brisbane streets. He sends love to you all and says you will do greater things yet, which is a nice way of saying. And then we did produce what was probably the first newsletter, which I called Mayor Barber News, and the message was Mayor Barber's news magazine, best thing yet done anywhere. Impatient to show Barber. 74 congratulations to all concerned. That was Barber's birthday, 74, which was just after his birthday of 68. He was then 74.
Yes. So what do they mean about impatient to show?
Yeah, well, that was the cable from Francis. And then he writes, he asked me to, he was very happy. Francis writes saying that, well, let me read what Francis said, which is amusing, a nice little bit of description about Barber. I'm beginning to wonder seriously whether beloved Barber is in seclusion or not. No letters, no cables, no reports, no nothing are to be shown to him. But this morning he asked, any news from Bill? Yes, I replied, a new nice Barber magazine. Looking somewhat like a child anticipating ice cream. He asked me to bring it. And he was very happy with his ice cream. He confirmed my words. Best thing yet done anywhere. I also read out to him the names of the workers, including the family on this job. So I didn't have to bear for very long my impatience to show the new work to him. And that was, see, he'd cabled, and then this happened. So then we got a letter. The copy that beloved Barbara handled, I'm returning to you air bank book post. I take it you will be sending, say, 6 more by sea mail. And I remember another cable, 2 cables.
That was because other people wanted them there.
Yes, yes. I remember 2 little things that happened during that period. At one point I was very busy and I hadn't written, and suddenly a cable came from Barbara simply saying, addressed to me saying, how are you? In other words, why haven't I heard anything from you?
Yeah.
Which was very, very touching. And the other one, another one was that in a letter from Francis, he writes that Barbara said to me after, I think it was after he had read one of my letters, if I remember rightly, and he writes that Barbara said, tell Bill that he really is a gem, but that he is not to let this go to his head. Yeah, but it was a most intense and satisfying time. I loved the increased tempo of the work, the young ones and old ones that came, the joy that one could feel with the response of various ones to Barbara's message. It's so wonderful, because that sort of kindles the love within oneself.
Yes, and those were the honeymoon days for some.
They were. They certainly were. And at the same time, then towards in 68, it was announced that Barbara would give his darshan, another darshan program. And of course that also intensified the work of the young ones, particularly to create enough money to enable them to travel to India for that darshan program. And that was what, you know, as I said, handcraft work that gave them extra on top of whatever may have been their work. And of course it meant messages back and forth, but in the main the messages were mainly reports about Barbara's health and the concern of the Mandali of being able to have such an intense, another East-West program. And again, an increase of the number of Westerners that would come as a result of the turning of his key, of his key. Yeah. And then I continued to write, report to Barbara. I can remember trying to, putting in letters any encouraging news that I had.
Yeah.
And I would list the names of all who would help me in any project, in the hope that they were all read to Barbara, that Barbara would be aware of this one and that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Since you were the real contact with Barbara.
Yes. And Francis did, write, of course, some general letters which were addressed to Avatar abiders, which of course really included us. They were sent to us as a result, in the sense that we may not have actually been living on Avatar's abode, but we were very much involved. And Barbara wanted the family to be there, my family, myself and the family, to develop Avatar's.
We haven't talked about that, about you, Barbara wanting the family to be here.
Yeah, didn't I read? But I read that we were to. Yes.
Oh, you mean back in the wishes?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
Right, that was a while back.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And in other words, there was much activity, and then towards January again, there would be reports on the basis that Barbara would say, well, even if I gave darshan lying down, wouldn't that be all right? And the Mundley having to accept that. Barbara was not cancelling. That was the important point. That it was there. That whatever arrangements were being made, and people were saving their money, preparing for and organising groups to go to India, with, of course, as a group, hoping to get some discount in the fares. There was much activity. And in the midst of it, I was having trouble with my teeth. And it was quite clear that by January 69, that my teeth, it was no longer a case of, well, here, patching them up. Maybe it could have been done elsewhere, but in Australia, the advice that I was given that the teeth needed to come out and that I had to accept false teeth. And so it was arranged that I would go to the dentist on a morning of the 31st of January 1969. I can remember, it was a Friday morning, and I departed and had 10 teeth out, and that was the beginning of the a full plate of false teeth. And so, as you can imagine, with 10 teeth extracted, and I arrived home, and then in the evening receiving cable that Barbara had dropped the body. At the time, I was, I had ice seeking to minimise the flow of blood. I had my mouth covered, and of course greatly affected by the. I didn't have anaesthetic, general anaesthetic. I was just injections, so
They were wearing off.
So they were, of course, that had worn off, and I was very much in pain. And in the midst of it, it may not be in the evening, but first thing in the morning, I rang the General Post Office in Sydney, seeking clarification. Was this cable accurate? It was so sudden, it was so unexpected that all of a sudden Barbara had gone, physically gone. And then it was confirmed, and then of course I had to organise meetings to let people know, send out the news, and it was again a very intense and difficult time, physically for me as well as emotionally.
Yeah, horrible.
Yeah.
And so you had a meeting that.
And I had a meeting in it would have been Saturday night.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes. The Saturday. I do remember a big meeting. Of course, you could imagine the number of people that had come, hearing the news and wanting to know more.
Yeah.
What was it? I don't recollect how much I spoke. Of course, perhaps I had other people to read out whatever I had received, and there was, from my memory, shock silence rather than what to do, than any clear action as well. What action to take at that stage?
Am I just making this up that Adrian Rollins?
Yes, that's right. One, Adrian Rollins, who was a dramatic type of person, wonderful. He loved Barbara very much. He was very active. And Barbara sent me a message regarding him, saying that he would do good work for Barbara. And that is true. He brought many people again to Barbara. And with that news, he dramatically removed his clothes in a shock response to the news. Yeah. Yeah, so that was it. But then after that, although Francis implied that that nothing further would be done, at the same time the other Mundley, Erich Money, said that that naturally Barbara's directive should be carried out, that we were to come for his darshan.
Yes.
And so that then occupied our time for the first few months of 69. The preparation of the group to go to India to honour Barbara's invitation to be with him. And there was no question that we were, that Barbara was there so strongly. for myself, when I did go with the group, you know.
Did your family go as well?
Oh yes, the family went. We all went. In June of '69, we were the last group, last Westerner group. And I can remember that when I knelt at his chair, the chair that he sat in '62 in Guru Prasad, that when I knelt there to take darshan, I felt for a moment his arms around me.
Really?
Yeah. It was momentary, but it was there.
I never heard you say that.
No. And it was a most moving time with Erich. Such a clear picture of him standing there at the mic saying, in this hall of Guru Prasad, that I remembered being with Baba in '62. And Erich saying, 9 a.m. and you have honoured the call of beloved Avatar Maya Baba to be with him. The wording is elsewhere. And perhaps I could read a little of that darshan program. In May 1969, it was May, I thought it was June, it was late May.
Okay.
47 of us from Australia honoured beloved Baba's invitation for what has become known as the Great Darshan, held at Guru Prasad, Pune. In a family letter, Mani said, "How beloved Baba will give his darshan to the thousands who will come, yet remains to be determined, but it will be. He will give his darshan." That Baba did give his darshan, I can testify. As I knelt before his chair in Guru Prasad, I felt his arms around me as though he were physically there. And I know that so many who also took his darshan, perhaps all, would echo Francis's words, "What a beloved is our beloved, what a mighty beloved." As Mani said in the family letter after the Great Darshan, you had the beloved's darshan, and you had his sahavas, seated for hours before him in Guru Prasad, communing with him in silence and in speech. Often you crowded the hall, yet you were never a crowd to us. It was not a sea of faces we saw, but so many shining drops in his ocean. You brought Baba with you, and he was already here to receive you. You took him with you, and he is as ever with us. Such is the profound God humour that makes life's joke bearable. Isn't that beautiful? During these days we greeted beloved Baba's beloved Mayra, and she greeted us with a soft, shy Jai Baba. We listened to Francis reading his talk, The Mighty Beloved. We listened to the women Mandali singing the Gujarati Arti, for which Baba himself had written words and music. We listened to songs, music, and poems in praise of beloved Baba. We listened too to Adi Kairani give a talk on Baba, and all through ran the thread of commentary by beloved Baba's mouthpiece, Erich, helping in his own devoted way to embroider the tapestry of each day. At other times, the Australian women spent time with Mayra and the other women Mandali, while the men were with the men Mandali. On one day, we all travelled from Pune to Ahmednagar and spent time at Mehrabad and Mehrazad. On another day, we were taken by Baba's jovial brother Jal to Sassoon Hospital, where Baba was born, to the tomb shrine of Babajan, one of the 5 perfect masters who brought down God on earth, to Baba House, where he lived for a period, and to his room, where set into the floor is the stone on which in 1921 he would repeatedly knock his head, explaining years later that this physical pain helped to relieve the spiritual agony he was experiencing then. A little of how it was during that great darshan period. And then we returned, and that was when I said to the young ones, why not come together? Perhaps we could create something. And of course what I had in mind was the possibility of earning money for Avatar's Abode. And that, of course, became so clear, the prompting from beloved Baba, to enable me to fulfill his directive and develop Avatar's Abode as a place of world pilgrimage. It took me, of course, time for the money to eventuate in volume, but it did. But that was the incredible beginning. That from that moment,
You put $2,000.
and I used the 2,000. Actually, I had the 4,000. I remember I told you I had 4,000. When Francis returned in June, shortly after we had come back from India, Francis, of course, returned to live at Avatar's Abode. I was still with the family, very much in Sydney, very occupied with earning the necessary money for the family, and also it was where the Baba activity was taking place. That's where most of the new ones were coming. It was in Sydney. But of course, I always had in mind the development of Avatar's Abode, that other directive of Baba's which he emphasised so much. One, spread my love and message, and develop Avatar's Abode. And so I gave Francis 2,000 of that 4,000 that I had in the bank in reserve. And with the other 2,000, I began what became an incredible business. The first name I gave it was naturally Mayer Handcrafts, because that was the basis of the activity, handcraft work. Leather belts, moccasins, jewellery. And later, with the growth of the business, it just, by Baba's grace, by Baba's blessing, it just grew in bounds. But the beginning...
Everybody had a job there.
Yeah, but the beginning was interesting. The actual little history is quite interesting. When Francis returned, he spoke to me on the basis that India, with Baba gone, was finished. There was no point in looking towards India. That what remained for us to do as lovers of Meher Baba was to love him here in whatever way was according to our circumstances. That we should then continue to work, but think of him, participate in meetings, of remembering him, of preparing programs of entertainment for him, or programs of praise, you could say, whatever circumstances, in accordance with our abilities. And so I went along with that, and that also seemed to also be his attitude with regard to this business activity, which was just beginning. And in the beginning, there was only it was nothing more than myself and Reg Paffel and John and Wendy Borthwick. Really, that was really the beginning, and we had found a shop which was due to be pulled down, to be demolished, but we took it at a very cheap rent, thinking, well, this will be all right for as long as it exists, and then we'll move elsewhere. As it happened, that shop was not pulled down for about 3 years. And okay, incredibly enough, as soon as we put certain goods, certain handcrafted things that we collected from the Baba group, from the Baba people, and things we made ourselves, it was amazingly accepted and grew, and then at the same time we were approached to purchase from other people clothing from India, and I said, well, no, why don't we get that clothing ourselves? Why buy from other people when we can buy direct? And at the same time, I was approached by a couple, Steve and Rainey, Stephen and Rainey, to establish, to extend the activity to Queensland. In other words, where Avatar's abode was located. And at that point, I was talking to Francis, and Francis said, why expansion? Why get involved in this?
So was Francis in Sydney?
He was in Sydney at that time. And we were having this conversation in the room, in Barbara's room, that big room that I described earlier. That room where Barbara had his bed, where he had all the meetings. It was very much Barbara's room. And we were there, and I was at my desk contemplating what to do, and Francis counselled, why think in terms of expansion of the business? Why not just simply retire, as it were, into oneself to be with Barbara? And influenced by Francis as the elder of the tribe, of the Barber family.
And he would have been grieving at that time anyway.
Yes, yeah. And he was aware that he no longer had Barbara physically with him, or he was not there physically with Barbara. Barbara had directed that as soon as that Barbara dropped the body, Francis was to return to Australia. And so I said, yes, Francis. I said, yeah, well, that might well be the best thing. And Francis then, I can remember so clearly, turned and walked out of the room and left me sitting at my desk. And at that point, all I can say is that I received a very definite kick on my behind. And it almost as though I was lifted off my chair with a surge of certainty that to go ahead with the expansion of the business. And that was, you could say, the real beginning. And from that point, then over a short period of 3 years, almost all the Barber people available had the opportunity, who were seeking employment, who were seeking work. All those Barber people had the opportunity of joining what then became Maya Australia Proprietary Limited. It was a company. I formed a company, and at the same time I did form a trust, which was called Maya Barber Foundation Australia. And Avatar's abode, held by a company, was looked after by that foundation. In other words, it became the foundation's guardian in the development. And that was the beginning of the accumulation of money that I was then able later on to put into Avatar's abode and into many activities. Films, considerable money given to India for the development of Barbara's work and establishment there, buildings, and the maintenance of the Mandali, the old Mandali that were with Baba at the time when he dropped the body. And they needed funds to continue to live there and to maintain and care for Baba's home of the last 20 years of his physical life, Mehrazad. And then, of course, the development of Mehrabad, because gradually more and more people came to be with Baba, to take darshan, Baba's darshan, at his tomb shrine in Mehrabad. So it was a very wonderfully active, intense time when Baba's presence seemed to be, if one experienced it so strongly. He was so much with us. As I've described at times, it was as though the love that was released when his body, it was as though all that love was contained within his physical body, and that with dropping it, that love was spread. It was like a wave that so strong, so real, it as it were drowned for a moment the individual sanskaras, the ignorance and shortcomings of our individual selves in his love. Was a most wonderful period. Jai Baba. Jai Baba. One thing I forgot to mention yesterday was that on the 15th day, in other words, the day after I left Baba, in February '67, he directed that I should go with Dr. Donkin and Francis to Allura Caves. And what that visit has meant a great deal to me. Perhaps it was what Baba intended me to experience and think about. But when I saw the Kailash temple, the centerpiece of the Allura Caves, Buddhist, Jain and Hindu temples, the Kailash temple really was the one that hit home. And then finding out, being told that it had taken 300 years to create downwards into the mountain this incredible, complex, beautiful series of sculptures and sanctuaries, temples, and that it took 300 years, one generation after the other, carrying through that concept, that original concept. And it made me think, yes, Baba in this way is saying to me that the true, real development, the final development of Avatar's abode as a place of world pilgrimage may take many years and generations. And that actually does bring me to thinking about.
Just a minute, I was just going to ask you, because I love this detail, when you went to the caves, didn't Donkin climb up the rock cliff? Tell me about that. I love that
Well, imagine this cave cut into the mountain, and of course cut into it, or cut down into it, which is what happened. It left a cliff face, at least 100 feet high. How? Oh, at least 150 feet. Yeah, it was a sheer, absolutely vertical face, rock face, and while Francis and I were round at the bottom, peering, looking at the sculpture, studying, all of a sudden we hear a call, and I look up, and there a little figure, and that's the incredible part, is that it was so high that even Donkin appeared as a smaller figure, and he's sitting on the edge of the of this vertical drop, waving to us, calling out. Yeah, I'll never forget. I can still.
He climbed up the rock face?
He must have climbed up. How I don't know. No, he didn't climb up the rock face. He must have. Oh, you couldn't have done it without, equipment. But he must have approached it in some other direction. But the spectacle of him sitting on this sheer drop,
with his legs,
casually with his legs over the edge, just sitting there, waving, leaning forward and waving to us.
I love that. Okay. Sorry to interrupt. Just that. So sweet.
Yeah, and anyway, that does bring me the consideration of the time factor and the difficulties that I faced in carrying out Barbara's clear, emphatic order to me to develop Avatar's abode as a place of pilgrimage and to spread his message. His wishes were all through the wishes. In virtually every case, there was always that injunction of spreading, of living in such a way that one told others of his presence on earth, of the Advent and his message to us. Love God, and love God in the way that one thinks of others more than of oneself. The simple crux of the matter. Thinking more, loving God above all. And that the best way is to love and serve him in others rather than in oneself. I say rather than in the sense that it's a gradual process. Well, that's my experience. Very much an effort to remember to do this and to face up to that challenge. Now, in thinking about it, one thought is that let me go back, that when I first was given Mayabhaba's discourses and the message of Sufism through the Sufi society, which of course is essentially a path of love for God. It may involve meditation and of course repetition of his name, but it's very much a heart doctrine. And when I first, that was in 1947, and I was then, you could say for the first time, it really hit home the extent to which the general Australian population, very much the general one, was centred purely on an orthodox approach to Christianity. What's the word?
Sharia.
Purely faith, religion as presented by in the religion, in the Christian religion, and with no depth. And what I was told was, and it became so clear that anything else other than Christianity in Australia was regarded as heathenism. Wasn't even acknowledged as a Hindu religion, a Buddhist religion, a Muslim religion. It was nothing but heathenism because it wasn't Christianity. And the other thing that struck me and has continued even to this day is what you may call the lack of depth of thought and feeling that is apparent throughout the population. Please don't regard this. I'm not criticising. I'm trying to simply state my impression.
It's an objective statement.
An objective impression that I have observed over the years. I have spoken about Mayababa in Europe, particularly England and France. In fact, that's the only two countries in Europe. Excuse me. No, not in. Yeah, I was wondering about Switzerland, but anyway, England and France, and then America, and Australia, and what really hit home to me in
And India, of course.
Oh, and India, yes. Iran, for that matter, Pakistan. But anyway, what I'm referring to really are the Western countries. And what really came home to me was that Europe was, you could say, put it in terms of mankind, that it was a place of